to do, and I'd rather die than go on living without you. 'Cause you're the one for me. You're the one for me. Yeah, only one, nothing gonna hold us up. I got you, and after all that we've been through some things, but it's okay, okay. There is no way I'm leaving, baby, believe it. I put my hand into yours, and baby, I knew that you would be there no matter what we go through. You're not alone, I'll always be there for you. 'Cause you're the one for me. You're the one for me. Yeah, only one, nothing gonna hold us up. I got you, and after all that we've been through some things, but it's okay, okay. There is no way I'm leaving, baby, believe it. Yeah, only one, nothing gonna hold us up. I got you, and after all that we've been through some things, but it's okay, okay. There is no way I'm leaving, baby, believe it. Girl, I don't wanna sound like I'm on repeat. I know that it sounds like it might seem we've been through too much. I know it ain't easy to look at my face. It's difficult when you see things, and we're falling apart, and we've been trying to fix this. I'm hoping and wishing that things will be different. I don't wanna lose you and know that I miss this, 'cause you're the only one on my mind. Now listen, trying to be the man that you need. I need time, and I know that it seems I don't try, but I promise I won't lie, won't lie. Every time I look in your eyes, girl, I get this feeling that I've never had, and I just want you to understand. Yeah, you're the only one, nothing gonna hold us up. I got you, after all that we've been through some things, but it's okay, okay. There is no way I'm leaving, baby, believe it. Yeah, yeah, only one, nothing gonna hold us up. I got you, after all that we've been through some
in it? Do I live in it? So astounding. Love is an ocean, you can drown me. The sweet embrace, the lovely taste, I taste and see. I'm under grace, the place to be. It means I'll never need an umbrella. I'm cool in the cold, in the hot weather. Whether or never I ever understand, I'm a man in the hands of great plans. I stand with faith there in a life I never known to touch. And still outside my clutch, but I'm like, what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's to die for? Live to no end. This is living. The life I've been given is a gift. If I'ma live it to death. So what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's to die for? And live to no end. This is living. The life I've been given is a gift. If I'ma live it to death. Yeah.
This is living now. Take me higher than I've been before. It's your perfect love that sees me soar. God, your freedom is an open door. You are everything I want and more.
The head that once was crowned with thorns, glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at His feet we bow. The one who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty, the radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. The fear that held us now gives way to Him who is our peace. His final breath upon the cross is now alive in me. And your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King
Good morning. Welcome to second service Sunday morning. Cool, you're all awake and alive and vibrant and excited and happy to be here. There we go. Just, it was a slow burn, took a minute. Listen. I think we all know that someday the robots are gonna take over. You're the first service to laugh at that. Thank you so much. But yeah, Kurt Vonnegut, player piano style, all of our jobs are gonna be replaced by robots. And today we don't have a piano player, but we do have a robot to play piano for us. And since the robot was playing piano, we threw a little bit of robot guitar in there as well. So if you play piano or guitar and want to stop the Singularity's neck break approach to dominate humanity, just give me a call. We'll get you on the team. Until then, stand with us. And we will sing to the Lord.
Oh
gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Oh, your love. Because on and on and on and on it goes. It choose to recognize the sacrifice that Jesus made for each of us. That we were held in this system that was set up against us. That we were held to this measure of perfection that none of us could ever acquire. None of us could ever measure up to this perfection that we were asked to walk into. And we're celebrating this morning that our God saw that and loved us enough to come and to hang on a cross and to bleed and to die to break that system wide open, to shatter it and set us all free from this idea of perfection, to bring in this idea of love and grace so that we could stand at the cross with all of our flaws, with all of our shame, all of our guilt, everything we've ever done, everything we're doing, everything we will do. We could stand at the foot of the cross and be absolved, and be clean, and be seen as pure and loved children of the living God. So if you're unfamiliar, some trays are going to come up and down the aisle with a little wafer and a little cup of juice. Take one of each of those and take it on your own time. We're not going to do it together. And for a lot of us who maybe grew up in church, this was presented to you as a time where you should feel shame, where you should lash yourself for all of the ways that you haven't earned this gift, where you should be overwhelmed with guilt for all of the ways that you haven't measured up. And that is so deeply missing the point. The point is that we can't measure up. And that's why this gift is so audacious. That's why this gift is so amazing. It's like, yeah, we can't. None of us can measure up, but we don't have to because our God loved us enough to give us grace. So this is not a moment for you to hold this bread and this juice and feel guilt for all of the ways that you have fallen short, but this is a time for you to feel an overwhelming joy. That in spite of it all, you are still loved and accepted and adored by the Creator of the universe, and He is calling each of us into a better life. He's calling each of us out of the things that hold us back, calling each of us out of our sin and temptation and darkness, because He loves us that much. If you haven't been here with us before, you're going to hear those little plastic cups shatter all around the room, and it's this symbol that those things that held us are broken. The only thing that keeps us in those places is our unwillingness to just accept the gift we've been given, to just move forward, to walk away from the things that we have been freed of. So you hear those shatter all around the room, and it's a symbol that it is finished. The work is done. And if all of this is real weird and you don't know what I'm talking about and you don't want to participate, there's no shame in that at all. Just pass it around to the next person. You're safe and you're welcome here. We're so glad that you've chosen to be here with us this morning. If you have questions about what this is, there will be an opportunity later to ask those. But for now, just keep the tray moving. You're safe. No one's going to ask you to leave, and we're glad you're here. So let's pray, and we'll share in that meal together. God, we thank you that you loved us enough to break this system that had existed for thousands of years. That you saw that it wasn't working, that your children were suffering, and that you decided to pay the price to shatter the way that the world worked and to collide with this world in an audacious and over-the-top way, to come and to rescue and redeem each of us, God. And as we participate in this ritual, as we take these elements, we take the bread and we take the juice, God, that we not be overcome with guilt, but we be reminded that we've been given the opportunity to walk away from that which held us in captivity, and that we be overwhelmed with the joy that you loved us enough to rescue us. And may we walk in that freedom, God. In your name we pray. Amen.
I need you to soften my heart, to break me apart. I need you to open my eyes, to see that you're shaping my life. It's all I am. I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say. That you're good, your love is great. I'm broken inside. I give you my life. I need you to soften my heart, to break me apart. I need you to pierce through the dark and cleanse every part of me. All I am, I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say. That you're good, your love is great. I'm broken inside. I give you my life. Oh. 'Cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. Give me faith to trust what you say. That you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside. I give you my life. Give me faith to trust what you say. That you're good, your love is great. I'm broken inside. I give you my life. Oh, 'cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. And I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. Give me faith to trust what you say. That you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside. I give you my life. we give you our lives. We come here today to worship you for all that you are, for how good to us you are, for how much you love us, for how much you care about us, for all that you've done for us, God. We love you. Amen. You guys take a seat.
Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the other has to say. Reminiscing this and that and having such a good time. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. Never ever thinking there was danger in the water they were drinking, they just guzzled it down. Never dreaming that a scheming sheriff and his posse was watching them and gathering around. Robin Hood and Little John running through the forest, jumping fences, dodging trees and trying to get away. Contemplating nothing but escaping, finally making it. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day.
Hey, that's one of my favorite television commercials of all time. And so hopefully, that will make a lot more sense to you by the time we walk out these doors together here in just a little bit. Hey, before we get to that, though, and talk about that, hey, good morning to you. It's still morning. Good morning. Hey, good to see you. Welcome to this place we call DCC. Always good to have you here. It's especially true if you are brand new friend here with us for the first time today. If that's you, we want you to know that you're safe. Your story is safe here regardless of how it reads. True every single week. You've walked into a place of people today that are exactly like you. I promise you that is true. We're just a community or a tribe or a group of people that every single week we get together. We're chasing after a better way to live. We're convinced there's a better way to live out there. We happen to believe in this place that this guy named Jesus offers that to all of us, and he offers up this better way to live. Probably the best news for you, though, is you don't even have to believe that to belong with us every single week. So thanks for being with us today. Thanks for taking a chance on us. It means a lot. I hope you felt and experienced all that already and that you want to come back and do this with us again real soon. So special shout out to you if you're brand new, and of course to all of our online friends who are checking us out right now too. Good to have you with us. Hey, we're wrapping up a series today called Distortion. We've spent the last 6-7 weeks talking about this distorted image that we all tend to have in one way or another about God and all the problems and issues and challenges that are associated with that. And so we've talked about a lot of really important stuff, and I just have to say this. Thanks for all your feedback on this series. You've loved it. You've talked great things about it. It's obviously been one of the most popular series that we've ever done, so thanks for all of that. But we talked about some really, really important stuff, but I don't know that anything that we've talked about to this point has the power to revolutionize this thing that we're doing called church, has the power to change what people think when they hear this word Christian, which happens to be the vision of this place that you're sitting in today. We want to redefine Christian and change what people think when they hear the word Christian. I don't know that anything we've talked about to this point has the power to do that more than you and I walking into where God is and talking through where God is on the stuff that we're going to talk about and talk through today. I want us to end this series by talking about this. God is not homophobic. God is not homophobic. Now, homophobia is a fear. It's an unreasonable fear of or opposition to or dislike of homosexuality and homosexual people. So I'm not clear on a lot of things in my life, but let me say this. I'm absolutely clear about this. God's not like that. And we shouldn't be either. And as we jump into this journey together today, you need to know I'm not an expert on this subject. There are a lot of people out there a lot smarter than me, a lot more studied than I have been. I've got a lot to learn here. I'm trying to learn it. But I've got a lot to learn about how to love like Jesus and live like Jesus with my wife, Stacy, with my 4 daughters, with my grandkids, with the people on our team, our staff team here, my friends in the world around me, and even with my friends. I got to learn to love and live like Jesus more with my friends who are part of the LGBT community. That's just true. And so I studied a lot, and I'm trying to say, what does this look like in my life and story? How's this heart that God has supposed to play out in my life and story? And so just to get ready for today, I read 2 different books in the past week in order to try to get ready for this weekend. And I'm going to recommend to you that you do that too, because listen, there is no way. This is a complicated issue. It's way above my pay grade. There's so much to know about this. I want to recommend to you, I can't do this in 30 minutes. Read these books. So 2 books. One's called Redeeming Sex by Deb Hirsch. Great book. Another one's called Us versus Us by Andrew Marin. Now, Andrew also wrote a book called Love is an Orientation, which he wrote a few years ago. I'd recommend that one too. So there's 3 books for you. But as we walk into this journey and we start this together today, I want us to start with a quote from the book Us versus Us. So listen to this. This lady named Sherry says this. She says, I live in a religiously conservative city, and I'm under no assumption the people here will think it's great if I marry a woman one day. But for how religious everyone is, a gesture of telling me I'm loved every once in a while would go a long way to how I view them and their version of God. That quote comes from Sherry, who is a 36-year-old bisexual woman living in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Hits close to home, doesn't it? See, this is our context. Andrew Marin says, unless you have been sexually attracted to a person of the same sex, you cannot fully grasp as a heterosexual person what that actually means. Unless you and I, as we sit here today, we've actually been sexually attracted to a person of the same sex, we can't fully grasp as a heterosexual person what that actually means. And I believe that's true. In some ways we don't have a clue. So we can't actually grasp that, but I do think that we can get more clarity on who God is, where His heart is with our friends and family members and co-workers and the people in the world around us who identify as LGBT. We can get absolute clarity, more clarity on that in all of our lives and stories. And we really, really need to. And how that plays out in our lives and stories and what that should look like in our lives and stories. We really don't have a choice. We have to talk about this stuff because we've missed the boat for too long now. See, the big challenge is not God. The biggest challenge we face is the people who claim to follow Him. And God tends to get a bad rap. And they end up with a distorted image of who God really is. So let's see if together today we can begin to change that. All right, let's do this thing. Let's go to John chapter 4. That's where we're going to spend our time today. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and open it up, John chapter 4. If you don't, they're on the back tables if you can grab one now. If that's not too weird or awkward. If it is, grab one on your way out. Take it home with you. You can hit our app, hit YouVersion, or you can just read with me on the screens. Now, before we start reading in John chapter 4, we're going to start in verse 7. Let me give you a little context on the story we're walking into. So Jesus has been doing ministry down in Judea, and He decides to go home. Home for Him is Galilee. The problem is that Judea and Galilee are separated by Samaria. Let me throw a map up so we can all be scholars here. I really like maps. And so here we go. I want to show you here. This is Judea, so this is where Jesus is. Jerusalem's down here. He wants to go up here. Galilee is up here. This is where He's born, up here in Nazareth, by the Sea of Galilee it's called. But in order to get from here to here, He's got to go through this place called Samaria, which creates certain challenges for Jewish people. But Jesus decides to go through Samaria. So He gets to this town called Sychar, which I meant to show you where that was. Sychar is somewhere to the east of this city right here. Right in this area right here is where He is. He sits down by a well. He's tired and he's thirsty, and it's lunchtime. That's where we're picking up the story. So John chapter 4, beginning with verse 7. So He's in Samaria. And it says, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into town to buy food. Why? Because it's lunchtime. The Samaritan woman said to Him, you are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Okay, let's pause right there. All right, so it's excuse me, sir. Time out, sir. But there are lots of reasons why you and I should not be talking right now. Let me give you 2. I'm a Samaritan, and I'm a woman. Now, let's talk about that just a second. So if you don't know this, Samaritans in Jesus' day were considered to be half-bred dogs. Jewish people looked down. They despised them. They didn't want to associate with them. That's why most Jewish people, rather than going up through Samaria, like Jesus chose to do here, would go around it in one way or another. They'd either head to the far west and go up by the Mediterranean Sea, or they'd go up on the other side of the Jordan. So I'm a Samaritan. That's one strike against me. And she's also a woman. Jewish men in that day did not speak with women publicly. So there you have it. Guys like you, sir, they don't look at, they don't interact with, they don't talk with, and they certainly don't have conversations with someone like me. Jesus doesn't flinch and He doesn't hesitate. Now, if you keep reading in the story, we're going to skip over this part, but if you keep reading in the story, you're going to see that Jesus is interested in so much more here than just a drink of water. Yes, He's thirsty, but this is about something so much bigger than that. He's interested in her. He's interested in her life. He's interested in her story. He's interested in everything that's going on in her world, and He wants to have a conversation with her, which she's confused by. She just doesn't understand why, and here it is. Because Jews in this day, here's the word, categorize people like her. She falls into two categories. This should cause Jesus not to want to look at her, and certainly not want to talk to her. She's a Samaritan and she's a woman. All right? So what? That's the question. There we are. So what? What is there for us in this? All right, how about we start with this? God doesn't categorize people. God doesn't categorize people. Unfortunately, in the church, we have and we still do. My friend Yemi preached for me 2 weeks ago, and he talked about God is not a racist. He talked about God and race, and he talked about that there was a time, even in church world, where if you were of a certain race, you fell into a certain category. You know, it breaks my heart when I think about all the years that people sat in churches week after week after week, and this thing called slavery was okay with them. That putting people of a different race in a different category was just the way we do things in church. And if you think about it, that's not the only example, right? Back in the 60s, we created a category for hippies. We create categories for people who don't dance or who do dance. We create categories for people who smoke, who drink, who do the D word. They've been divorced. We create categories for teenagers that get pregnant and they aren't married. We create categories today for people who use medical marijuana. And the list goes on and on and on and on. When you look back through church history, what you're going to find is there is a very sad, very extensive, very exhaustive list of things like the things that we're talking about today. But now you walk into church today and everything's changed. You walk into church today, we got to figure it out, right? We've corrected that. Everything's different. No, it hasn't. It really hasn't. These pastors' words, these comments I'm getting ready to read to you, they're going to hit a lot closer to home than a lot of us would like to admit. I want you to listen to what he says. He says, I don't want to be closed-minded or judgmental, but in good conscience, I simply can't approve of the lifestyle. I personally believe it's a choice, not something predestined or forced by anyone. When people choose this lifestyle, some of them go as far as to claim that God made them the way they are, pushing onto God their responsibility for their own choices and behaviors. And activists may use the word love to justify their behavior, but those who disagree with them are seldom treated with love. They send out hate mail, peppered with a wide range of threats and abusive speech, with many calling for our damnation. But even so, we've learned that we must not respond to hate with hate. We must love these people and seek to help them, even though we do not approve of their behavior. And just so we're clear, I'm not talking about the gay community. I'm talking about the church community. Now, they didn't go quite where we were expecting it to. We got to get this, church. God doesn't categorize people. But unfortunately, we do. We categorize sin. And then we drop people who struggle with those sins into certain categories too. You know why I know this? Because I've been a victim of this. 13, 14 years ago when I had an affair as a pastor and resigned from ministry, and I started working with a really good counselor for a few years, and my wife stayed with me, Stace, and she and Jesus are the real heroes in the story, and I talk about it a lot. I'm not proud of it, but it's true. When that happened in my life, I got dropped into a category. I got dropped into a certain category by certain pastors and certain church people, and it sucks. It just does. I mean, still today, in some of their minds, I'm still in that exact same category. And that sucks. And what I want to say to you is, if that's ever happened to you in church, or if that's ever happened to you by church people, I am so, so sorry that it's happened to you. There's a lot of hurt and pain in that. And unfortunately, when it comes to what it is that we're talking about today, and homosexuality, man, is this the case. We're really, really bad with this stuff. We reread like Leviticus chapter 18 and Leviticus chapter 20. There it is. Boom, stone them. And then Romans chapter 1 and 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and 1 Timothy 1. We read those things and we create these things, right? We come to certain distinct conclusions about people, and then we drop them into these very specific categories, and all of a sudden they look, and church is no longer, they look up and church is no longer a safe place for them. I think it might be helpful for us, rather than just talking about it, it might be helpful for us if we were to experience just a little bit of this by spending a moment or two with one man and seeing it through his eyes and through his experience. I want you to watch this.
I am same-sex attracted and have been my entire life. By that I mean that I have sexual, romantic, and deep emotional attractions to people of the same sex. I choose to describe myself this way because sexuality is not a matter of identity for me, and that has become good news. My primary sense of worth and fulfillment as a human being is not contingent on being romantically or sexually fulfilled, and this is liberating. The most fully human and complete person who ever lived was Jesus Christ. He never married, he was never in a romantic relationship, and never had sex. If we say these things are intrinsic to human fulfillment, we are calling our Saviour subhuman. I've met literally hundreds of Christians in my situation, and know of thousands more who are same-sex attracted and who joyfully affirm the traditional understanding of marriage being between a man and a woman and the only godly context for sex. If you don't hear from more of us, it is because it is very hard to stand up and describe ourselves in this way. As someone who uses the language of same-sex attraction, I have to say that my church has not become a safe place for me. And by church, I don't mean my congregation, I mean this synod. Not because of what the report says, but because of what has happened since. I was bullied at school for being gay. I now feel I'm being bullied at synod for being same-sex attracted and faithful to the teaching of Jesus on marriage. I'm grateful the report reaffirms the traditional doctrine of marriage. I'm concerned that we're already preparing to pastorally undermine it. So my question to the bishops is not, will you preserve this doctrine? It's, do you really believe in it? Is it good news for the world? Many of us have found it to be life-giving, as the message and teaching of Jesus always is. Thank you.
So we hear one thing about who Sam Allberry is, and we immediately drop him into one category, into a specific category, a category that is completely and absolutely untrue. His orientation does not categorize him. Did you hear what he said? He said, I'm a Christian who's same-sex attracted and who yet holds on to who joyfully affirms the traditional understanding of marriage as God drew it up in Genesis 2, one man, one woman, and that, I recognize that is the only godly context for sex. And yeah, the Bible talks about Sam's temptation. It does. But the Bible also talks about racism, and it talks about greed, and it talks about gluttony, and it talks about gossip, and it talks about idolatry, and it talks about adultery, and it talks about fornication. And guess what? It talks about each one of those things more. And yet we get this hot button topic in the church world, this thing that we happen to be talking about today. When you look at this thing in Leviticus chapter 18, you will find it in the midst of 12 other ways that we can take our sexuality off the rails and out of bounds, including things like sex with animals. I mean, come on, I love my dog, but come on. And yet, what? It's in the midst of 12, 13 things, and we spotlight it, we highlight it. We put it in a category of its own, and we make it the only thing. I want you to listen to how another man experienced that. This is in the book, Us Versus Us. He says, to this day, I tithe 10% to charity. It's a conviction I learned growing up Baptist. I'd never admit this to some of my friends, but I miss church a lot. It's a part of me that will never die. I feel sometimes like I have more in common with my Baptist brethren than my own gay community, but that's a part of me that probably won't be known further because I can't find one of my Baptist brethren to get to know me enough to find that out. If they did, you could not pull me out of that church. If they did what? If they simply refused to allow themselves to put me in a separate, distinct, and different category, you couldn't pull me out of that church. I would keep coming to that church. I want to experience the love of Jesus just like you do. You could not pull me out of that church. That is sad, and it's unfortunate. It is a sad and unfortunate reality of this thing that we do call church. See, our problem is that when people do things that we don't do, when they struggle with things we don't struggle with, when they struggle or do things that we don't understand, we immediately drop them into a category that suggests to them that somehow, some way, God sees them differently or that He loves them less. And that is never, ever true. And Sam Allberry says this. He says, despite the fact that my fellow bishops want to drop me into a category, I'm going to hold on to this. I'm going to hold on to the gospel. The message of Jesus is still good news to me and for me. And I want you to know the message of Jesus Christ, the gospel message of Jesus, is good news for every single one of us in this room today too. God does not categorize people. We got to stop doing that. We got to stop doing that. Let's keep reading in the story. So Jesus, He talks to her about this living water that He came to bring. And then she says this, verse 15, Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming back here to draw water. And He told her, Go, call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. And Jesus said to her, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you've said is just true. It's like, whoa, Jesus. Right? Wow, Jesus, back up just a bit, dude. That's a little bit harsh. What's he doing here? I mean, there's something about this. Just go, what does this feel like? This feels like Leviticus 18. This feels like this thing that we like to do in church world. See, as Christians, we become really good at truth slapping people. We truth slap. Come here. I can tell you something. Right? Oh, come here. Let me show you something. We truth slap people. You know, it's like there's a class or something on it. Oh, there is a class. We call it evangelism. Let me ask you a question. Would this scenario be any different if Jesus said, yeah, I know. You've had 5 lesbian wives. The woman you're with right now, you're not married to her. That's a quiz. Result any different? Answer, no. Why? Because God doesn't categorize people. We've got to get this. And yet, even though that's true, this moment, this truth slap that Jesus does here, just like bam, right in her face, like, oh, right? There's something in us that just wants to jump to certain conclusions. It's like, but before we jump there, we've got to realize this. We are 17 verses into a long conversation. That's a deal changer. 17 verses into a conversation that started with what? Love, acceptance, mercy, and grace. All right, so I think when we read this moment with Jesus, rather than saying, come here, let me truth slap you, there's something else we need to see in this. And here it is. God is all about compassionate conversations. God is all about compassionate conversations. Some research conducted by the Marin Foundation, they do this great research. There's a lot of great research out there. You know what it suggests? It suggests that our friends and family members that are part of the LGBT community are less concerned about our theology on homosexuality. They're less concerned about our theology on homosexuality than they are how they have been and continue to be treated by Christians in the church. We are not known for our compassion. We are not known. We are known for our conviction and our condemnation. We are not known for our compassion. And if you think about it, it really makes sense. Now, this doesn't justify it, but it makes sense. When are we most compassionate? You know when we're most compassionate? We're most compassionate when we can relate directly to what the person is going through. And so we just said a few minutes ago, part of our problem is that we don't really understand. And so my question is this: how hard are we really trying to? You see, we've got to get this. The real issue on the table here is not homosexuality. The real issue on the table before us today is this. It's sexual orientation. And when it comes to sexual orientation, let me tell you something. We're all in the same boat. When it comes to sexual orientation, every single one of us can say me too. And here's why I say that. Because God gave us this incredible gift, this mind-blowing thing, this greatest of all human experiences called sex. And I was reading this past week that we ought to feel sad for our atheist friends because they don't have anybody's name to call out in the moment of truth. I thought that was awesome. So pray for your atheist friends, right? Oh! Okay, so enough of that. I digressed. Oh yeah, I'm back. So God gives us this incredible thing called sex, and teenagers, it is incredible. We'll talk about that later. But and then what's He do? He severely limits our ability to experience it. One man, one woman in marriage. That's it. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of us in this room have really never messed that up? When you think about where your heart is, where your desire is, what your orientation really is, what your default position is it really that, or would you prefer something else? I've had a lot of Christian friends admit to me, yeah, I mean, my default position, my orientation really is for something other than the way God drew this thing up. And see, this is where we can start to feel self-righteous, but let's go here. Jesus said it's not just about doing it. If you look at a woman, and let's be fair here, ladies, because I read the statistics, if you look at a man with lust in your eyes, it's the same thing. You've jumped the rails of where your sexuality is supposed to be. You're out of bounds. And so I wonder as we sit here today, how many of us can say, you know what, in the last decade, in the last year, in the last several months, in the last few months, in the last month, in the last week, in the last days, in the last hours, I've never done that. I've never struggled with any of that. No. I never lust. I never watched that movie or that TV show I like and go, ooh, what if? I've never sought out that boyfriend, even though I'm married now. I never sought out that old boyfriend on Facebook. I've never done that. I've never sat on my computer late at night when my wife and kids are in bed and taking a look at that. No, I've never done that. I never stepped out of bounds when I was single. I never did it. You know, I never stepped out of bounds during my marriage or after my marriage when I was divorced or divorced again and single. I've never done, no. Really? Really? I love what Deb Hirsch says about this. She says, this is from Redeeming Sex, acknowledging our own broken sexuality enables us to identify with a sexually broken humanity. We must see heterosexuals as no less broken than homosexuals. We are all together in the human experience of life and trying to live out the reality of the kingdom. I love this quote. Every human being on the planet is sexually broken. Everybody's orientation is disoriented. All of us are on a journey towards wholeness. Not one of us is excluded. Me too. If there's ever been a time for me too, it's right here. Me too. But it's bigger than that. Because see, I personally think that the path that God asks our friends and our family members and our coworkers who are part of the LGBT community, the path He asks them to walk is a much harder path to walk than the one He asks us as heterosexuals to. Have you ever thought about that? We say we don't understand. Are we really trying to? Have you ever thought about the beautiful people, all these beautiful people that make up this community? Did you ever think this? What if these beautiful people didn't choose to be this way? And you're like, whoa, time out. Are you saying they're born this way? No, I don't know. Guess what? You don't either. Science doesn't know. And we can sit here today and tomorrow and the next day and debate this all day long. So we can argue about things that we're never ever going to settle on, or we can simply talk about this. Let's talk about something we do know. I do know this. I have two separate friends. One of them, a bisexual lady in her mid-30s. Another of them, a transgender, male to female, now in her 60s, who have both told me this. They would change this about themselves if they could. In fact, they have prayed. One of them's prayed for over 40 years for God to take this away, and He hasn't. Now, am I suggesting that every person who's a part of the LGBT community is like that? No, I don't know that. Research, though, suggests that a lot of them feel this way. They wish they weren't this way. There's a heaviness that's on them because of this. You know what I read this past week, too? 80% of people in the LGBT community pray on a regular basis. I think that's more than most church people. But so I can't say this across the board, but statistics show us that a big majority of people do. They ask for this to take away. So we don't understand. Are we really trying to? Are we having conversations? Oh no, can't have a conversation with them. Why? Because they're in a category of people that we don't have conversations with. You see our dilemma here? You see our problem? Oh, we don't understand. Are we really trying to? Because if we want to understand, we have conversations. And when we do have conversations, here's what you're going to hear. You're going to hear about sexual abuse like things you've never heard before that will just blow your mind. Brutal, ugly, terrible, horrible stuff that no person needs to go through. You're going to hear of men who decide it's their life's mission to prove to lesbian ladies that they're not really lesbian. You know how they do it? They beat them, they torture them, and they rape them. You're going to hear of deep, dark depression. You're going to hear of suicide rates that are off the chart. You know, teenage suicide in our world is a big deal. It's a big problem. It's a big problem in our city of Colorado Springs. But did you know this? If a teenager identifies as LGBT, they are 4 times as likely to take their own life. If they identify as LGBT and their families push back on that or treat them like they're weird or disown them, they are 8 times as likely to take their own lives. Suicide in the transgender community. 41% of people who identify as transgender try to kill themselves. 33% of the time they are successful. You think about that number, 41%. The next closest group is schizophrenic, which is 5.6%. We don't understand. Are we really trying to? Do we understand, as people who are trying to follow Jesus in the church world, do we understand what we're asking our friends and family members who are part of this community, what we're really asking them to do? We're asking them to be celibate, say no, or to force themselves into a heterosexual marriage. When many of them will tell you, I don't know why I'm this way, but I don't really have much heterosexual attraction at all. Sorry, that's your choices. What are we asking them to do? We're asking them to never, ever, ever act on the deep desires of their own hearts for love and intimacy. Have we ever paused just to go, I wonder how much that hurts? We don't understand. Are we really trying to? And you're like, well, wait a minute. We tell people, single people in the church, they need to wait. True love waits right here. Wear your ring, promise ring, all that stuff. Yeah, we do. But have you ever thought about the difference? When it comes to most single people in church world, there's a someday for them. There's a someday. With our friends in the LGBT community, there is no someday. Our answer is never, sorry, never, but, oh, I've read the book, I've seen the movie, heaven is for real, so someday things are going to be great for you. How much does that really help them in the pain of the moment, in the pain of today? And listen, here's what I want you to understand. I would never, ever, ever suggest that we change the answer. We cannot change the answer. We can't. But I am asking, how in the freaking world can we not have compassion when we really start to think through all this stuff? Billy Graham's one of my heroes. I love him. Passed away a few months ago. Heard lots of great stories. Read lots of great books on Billy Graham. And this is one of my favorite stories. So several years back when Bill Clinton was our president, he was invited to a rally in support of President Clinton. Unfortunately, it came at the time right after the sex scandal broke and Monica Lewinsky and I did not have sex with that woman and all that stuff was very public and it was all coming to bear. And so a reporter grabbed Billy when he got there and said, hey, Billy, I got to ask you a question. Why are you here? He's like, well, what do you mean? Well, he goes, why are you here in support of this president who's just done this to Hillary and done this to Chelsea, done this to his family, done this to his friends, done this to our country? Why are you here? And Billy Graham said this. I love this. He said, it's the Holy Spirit's job to convict. It's God's job to judge. And it's my job to love. Wait, Billy. Time out. I need to pull you aside here, Billy. You're an evangelist. Like one of the biggest ever. It's your job to tell people turn or burn. It's your job. It's your job to tell them they're sinners. It's your job to tell them they're going to hell unless they experience Jesus. And Billy's like, I got one job, 2 words. To love. My question is, are we focusing on our job? Or are we more focused on something that was never our freaking job? That's the question. Well, let's finish this up. And so the Samaritan woman runs off to tell her friends about this guy, Jesus. Verse 40, so when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. And they said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we've heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. So how did all these people's lives change for the better forever? Was it that the Samaritan woman had such great theology? No. Was it that she could make a very compelling theological argument in support of Jesus? No. Was it that she's a great orator and a great communicator? No. They told us what it was. It was as a result of their own experience with Jesus. See, look, we can argue and debate with people till we're blue in the face. And we can argue with people about their life choices. We can argue with people about the lifestyles and the way they're choosing to live their lives. That's one option. Or we can point them to something that's better and different like the Samaritan woman does here. Why don't we do that? I'm going to tell you what a big part of our problem is. Inside the walls of this thing called church, hopefully not this church, but the capital C church, we feel all of this pressure to condemn. We feel all this pressure on the inside to condemn. Got to condemn it. Got to condemn it. Got to condemn it. It's even worse. Got to condemn them. Got to condemn them. Got to condemn them. And then we walk outside the doors of these things we do call church, and we feel all this pressure to condone it. Condone it, condone it, condone it. And then we say, okay, church is going to be a part of my life. And so we start to sit in a church on a regular basis. And now we feel all this pressure to convict and convert. I got to convict and convert. I got to convict and convert. We're jacked up. Can I tell you something? Compassion wins. Compassion wins, compassion wins, compassion wins every single time. See, I believe with all my heart, everything in the world would change if we could just get this. It is more about our posture than our position. It is more about our posture than it is our position. Greg Kukl says it this way. He says, we shouldn't add any offense to the gospel. It's already offensive enough. And then he says, if people hate us, just be sure that it's for genuinely following the teachings of Jesus rather than for an unbiblical attitude. Why do people hate the church? Why do people hate the people who sit in the church? It is not because we are following the teachings of Jesus. It's because of our unbiblical attitude. I'm going to tell you something, church. Our attitude and our approach will always be more powerful than the best of theological arguments than we will ever make. We must lead with our embrace, not with our theology. We have to lead with love. We have to lead with our embrace, not our theology, because when we lead with our theology, we can't help it. We get caught up in the wrongness of what the person is doing, and the person gets left behind. They get totally and completely lost. So I'm caught up in the wrongness of what you're doing, and I'm missing you. I'm missing your hurt. I'm missing your pain. I'm missing your confusion. I'm missing your broken heart. The person gets lost. We have to reach out and embrace people where they find themselves. Wherever we find them, we got to love, love, love them, and then we got to slowly and intentionally point them to Jesus. We got to get people in a room with Jesus. We got to get people in the room so they can bump into and experience Jesus. Why? I'll tell you why. Because redemption and sanctification and restoration and healing, the last time I checked, it's His job, not ours. Right? Yeah, you can clap for that. But we do have a role to play in this. In 2 Corinthians 5, God says, you're my ambassadors. Right? And He says, I'm handing you this ministry of reconciliation. Now, I'm not God, but if I were God, I think that's a big mistake. But He did it. Which means that the responsibility for reconciling people and God is on us as the church. That we have to go first. That we have to make the first move. So rather than reacting to people, we need to be reaching out to people. And so my question is, how are we doing with that? Because my experience has been this. We sit back in our comfortable churches and our approach is more, hey, clean your act up, change that about your life, and then you can come be a part of this with us. We got to quit fooling ourselves. We need to be honest with ourselves. Our unloving attempts to argue others into believing what we believe, it's not working. Our theological convictions and conclusions and priorities are absolutely and completely meaningless if they are disconnected from what we see Jesus living out with this Samaritan woman at the well here. A commandment that He has given us, all of us, to love our neighbors as ourselves. If we will be committed to that, if we will be committed to simply love above all else, you know what? I don't have it all figured out, but I'm going to love above all else. I'm going to love above all else. Can I tell you something? Loving above all else, irrespective of our theological positions, is going to be far more productive than this seemingly endless debate that we are in over whose definition of sin is ultimately going to win. Because that's getting us nowhere. Tasha, 21-year-old lesbian young lady in Miami, Florida, said this: all I wanted was to feel loved by those in the church I grew up with. And to me, love is not being demanded to turn straight or loving me in truth. The only truth I ever got wasn't in love. It was done by those who thought they had the right to tell me how wrong I am and how disappointing I am to God. That's not love. Love is giving me time to be with you, to figure this out together. If you let any church people read this, please, please, please tell them that I don't have to be right to feel loved. I don't have to be right to feel loved, but I have. I have to be dignified in our disagreement. You know what the latest statistics tell us? 92%. 92% of our friends and family members who identify in the LGBT community, 92% of them are not asking us to change or are requiring us to change our theology before they'll come to church or come back to church. 86% of the LGBT community grew up in church. That's higher than the average American population. That average, by the way. And they're saying that we don't have to change our theology. We don't have to change our beliefs. The vast majority of them are not asking us to. You know what they're asking us to do? They're asking us to do what Jesus commanded us to do. Just to love them as much as we love ourselves. Our friends in this community ought to be flocking into this place. They ought to be packing this place out. We ought to be having to add chairs every single week. Why? Because of the way that we love people, all people. DCC, we have to be this place. We have to be a place that every single week, any person that walks in those doors, whether they are gay, lesbian, bi, trans, or straight, is able to sit in here comfortably and safe and experience the radical and the reckless love of Jesus. It's the Holy Spirit's job. It's not our job to do the Holy Spirit's job. It is the Holy Spirit's job to convict and to condemn and to convert and do all this stuff that we take on in the church. It's His job to convict. It's His job to convert. That's not our job. Our agenda in this place every single week should be this. We're going to walk into the ambiguity. We're going to walk into the mess. We're going to walk into the tension together that exists in all of our lives and stories in one way or another. And we're just going to bring the love of Jesus into that. And there is a lot of hurt. And there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of misunderstanding. But you know what? I don't have this thing all figured out. But if we will start on every side of the equation, if we simply just start to fill the gaps that exist between us with love and grace and mercy and compassion and truth, if we bring all that in, I'm telling you, with God's help, we can sort all of this out. All love, all grace, all truth, all compassion, all the time. That's who Jesus was. That is who we must be too. And so if we really want to see God as He clearly is, undistorted view of God, we have to get this. God has always been, and God will always be about this. Together, together, together. Even when we are not the same. Let me pray for us. Let's keep coming back to what we just sang a few minutes ago. I'm broken inside. And we all are. And there's so much hurt, so much pain, so much hatred, so much misunderstanding, so much tension around what it is that we're talking about today. Would you come into the midst of this? I pray that no person walk out of this place today without hope, without love that can only be found in you. And Jesus, the story that all of us are sitting in today is quite simply boils down to this. Two forces at play. There's you who wants to lead us to more out of this life to the fullest. And there's an enemy that wants to steal from us, kill us, and destroy us. And Jesus, we're hopeless without you. So would you come? Would you give us faith to trust what it is you say, all of it, not to pick and choose. And that you're good and your love is great. We're broken inside. We give you our lives, Jesus. For you to come into the midst of the tension, into the midst of the confusion, into the midst of the hurt and the pain. Would you help this to be a place that is known to be full of people who, first things first, the first thing that always comes is love. That's love, and there's grace that paves the way for people to experience, understand, and live out your truth. So Jesus, come. Do what it is in us and through us that only you can do. And we commit every single bit of our lives, our hearts in this mission to you. So come, Jesus, in your name. Amen. Hey, real quick, thank you for being with us today. A couple of things I want to tell you before you scoot out, so sit tight. First one is this. We talked about summer's coming and it's on us, Memorial Day, and then boom, June comes, and we need your help, basically is what I'm saying. Attend one, serve one, attend one, serve one. That's going to be our battle cry and our song. I'm asking you, would you sign up to serve somewhere with us, especially heading into this summer? We've got lots and lots of needs, and we want to do this thing with excellence every single week, and you can help us with that. So there's tables out at the info booth. Go out the doors, look to the middle. Tables there, good people with iPads to help you do that. We expect you to take vacations. We expect you to have your fun time and your time off. We will work around that with you, but don't let that be a deterrent to you signing up to help us. Would you jump on mission with us this way? Please, please, please. I'm asking for you to help us. The second thing is the aquarium is out by the slat wall. We put that out every single year at this time of year. We're trying to send kids to camp. We're asking you to help us do that. It costs a lot of money to send kids to camp. We're trying to come alongside families and provide them assistance to make this affordable. We want every child, and when I say child, I'm talking middle and high school in this place, who wants to go to camp, to be able to go to camp because it's life-changing stuff. Our church makes a significant financial contribution towards this too, but we give you the opportunity to chip in. So if you got a 20 you want to drop in, you can drop in a check, whatever you got. The aquarium is out there, and the kids will all scream and cheer whenever you put anything in there, which is pretty cool. The last thing is this. Our partner Crossfire is going to be here tonight. They are hosting an evening with Michael Jr., the comedian Michael Jr. This guy's amazing. He's big time. He's a Christian comedian, but I'm going to tell you something. Unlike some Christian comedians I've heard, he's funny. He's really, I mean, this guy is like top shelf bomb. So he's going to be here tonight. Doors open 5:45, 6:30. The good news is for you, they asked me to invite you to this if you want to come. So there's still room. Probably should jump on the website and RSVP. You can find out more out there. But you can come tonight absolutely completely free, which is awesome. So you can hire a babysitter and not have to pay for a date night. It's a good deal. People have asked me about kids, older kids that can understand stuff. He's not going to be more coarse than I am. So. Well, actually, he'll be a lot less coarse than me. So it's going to be good. But just small kids, you want to have a baby. We don't have childcare is what I'm trying to say to you. No childcare tonight, but you're invited back on behalf and by our partner, Crossfire. Hey, if you got questions about church, go out, turn left, room called the garage. You want prayer, screen to my right, my left. You believe in what God's after in this place and what he's doing here, and you want to get on mission with us financially, we'd love that, but we don't pressure or push. We hang boxes on the wall by the doors, or you can hit our app or our website. I'll be out by the fireplace if you want to talk to me. We'd love to talk to you. Thanks for being here this weekend. Hope to see you back for Memorial Day weekend next week. Have a great week.
something amazing, a moment when heaven touches earth. Here in our hearts, Lord, we are waiting for something that's far beyond what we have seen or heard. Let our stars be ascension, let's begin the climb up this holy mountain where your glory
So I gotta say, when I first saw Baldy over there last night, I leaned over to my wife and I said, "What? They have a bald-headed midget playing piano now?" There you go. I stepped out for a donut when you announced why. Sometimes I run around a lot. Hey man, the real shit doesn't start at the race stop. This is just sing. Oh, that's perfect. You should check your time. I didn't know they were going back further. I'm from Lincoln. My brother's actually the head advisor for Christmas program. Yeah, and so once in a while I talk to him. Yep. Yeah, so it's just really weird. I always find this weird thing about her from Omaha and Lincoln. Because you're a materialistic whore. No, I kind of want to though. I haven't played since Far Cry 3. I haven't played since Far Cry 3. I heard the best thing about Far Cry 4 was just its font, like the he was the most imaginative part of it, and the rest of it was just kind of like cookie cutter. Here's Far Cry. Kill 30 ghosts to make one ammo pellet. You know, one set of like gold tinted glasses
for the medic team. So, yeah, just waiting to do a little run through.
Yeah,
How
I've
are
been
you doing?
playing They Are Billions on my PC. It is a lot of fun, but I'm over 60 hours into the game, and I have not won a single match yet. Yeah.
Good.
I'm very mad.
Yeah, I'm not good at that. Sometimes I have good patience, but generally I don't.
Well, in this one,
I got about 1 minute, and after
like,
that, we
it's
get
an
angry.
RTS, and it's essentially you're building a colony that's